Hello, grade 12s. Welcome back. It's Economics with Ms. Piwe. And just before the break, we were talking about the non-price competition strategies that businesses could use in order to attract new customers into the business and also to try and grow their market share. So let us continue. So before the ad break, we were looking at this point, the fact that large sums of money are spent on research, development and advertising in order to build a loyal customer group. Because if you've got a loyal customer group, they are not going to consider other options because they are so loyal to your brand and to your offerings as well. So let's continue and move on to our next point. Therefore, brands play a significant role in determining customer loyalty, where a consumer may choose one producer over another. Okay, so brand loyalty, because now you've got to choose the brand that works for you. So you are making a decision to say that, you know what, I'm sticking with this brand because I have been using it for so long, or my parents were using it and also I'm now using it because it's been so good to us. So you become very hesitant to try out other brands. So it's all about making sure that your brand plays an important role in order to determine the customer loyalty as well. Large chain stores like Checkers, Spar, and etc. have their own brands for some of the products. Most of these products are exactly the same as known brands. Okay, so you go to Checkers, Spar, or Pick n Pay. Pick n Pay has what they call their no-name brands, and those brands are, very similar to other brands that you might find at their chain stores. But the ones that they sell, their own branded brands, are in most cases they are cheaper than those of other names or other businesses or companies. So they are also now putting their brands into their offerings. Okay, and then I know that Pick n Pay uses no-name brands to cluster or to group their brands or products. All right, now moving on to prices, production levels, and in the short run and in the long term. Remember, we chatted about the short term and the long term when it comes to the production levels. And we said in the short term, it's very difficult for new businesses to come in because of the duration of the production levels. It's over a short period of time. Only variable costs can change in the short term, but the long-term variable costs and fixed costs can change in the long term. So those cannot change in the short term, the fixed costs, but they can change in the long term. We also said in the long term, there's an opportunity for new competitors to enter the market space. We know that it's difficult in the short term because of the length or the duration that is available in that production level. But in long term, actually, we do see new businesses and firms coming into the market space. So let's just explore this a bit further. So the demand curve for a monopolistic competition or competitor is similar to that of a monopolist. Okay, so we know that this monopolistic competition and a monopolist, they have the same demand curve. So short-term equilibrium, that is economic profit and economic loss, corresponds with a monopoly, but the demand curve is more price elastic, which is flatter, in other words, due to good substitutes. Okay, so now here we're in a market where substitutes are available. We know that in a monopoly, there are no closed substitutes that are available because you are dealing with an individual business or firm that produces a unique product. And then we know that there are all sorts of barriers, like the patent rights that are put on the products, which make it difficult for other businesses to manufacture a similar product, and also all the copyright issues that are involved in that sector. So here we see, because we have good substitutes, and therefore the demand curve will be different than that of a monopoly because of the substitutes that have been added on. Then in terms of the long-term equilibrium, it is characterized by normal profit due to the ease of entry, because we said entry is not difficult because there are less barriers in this market, and exit into the market as well. It's similar to a perfect market because in a perfect market, we know that there's free entry and exit onto or into this market. Then the economic profit made in the short term attracts more businesses to enter the market. Okay, so this is driven by the economic profit that is made in the short term. So this actually helps to attract more businesses to enter the market because businesses know that they can earn an economic profit in the short run in this particular market. Okay, so those are some important points that we need to note when we are looking at this type of competition. Now, let's have a comparison of the monopolistic competition with perfect competition. Hence, it's important to always try and do a comparison between these markets and also the competition that you find in these different markets. So we're looking at a comparison between a monopolistic competition and also a perfect competition. So both firms make normal profit in the long run. So that's a similarity because both in a monopolistic competition and in a perfect competition, firms will make a normal profit in the long run. Therefore, there is no difference in the long run between the perfect market and a monopolistic market as far as profit is concerned. So it's important that we note this point. What about the equilibrium? Because that should be interesting. So with regards to the equilibrium, the price is higher than in a perfect market. So the consumers therefore pays less in the perfect market and more in a monopolistic market. Okay, so we're looking at equilibrium price. So here, in terms of price, so price is higher than in a perfect market. So you as a consumer are therefore paying less under the perfect market conditions, and you will pay more under the monopolistic market competition. So just be aware of that. So that is a difference because in the first point, that wasn't a difference. It was more the same. It's very similar in both markets. Then moving on to our next point, the monopolistic competitor does not produce at a minimum of the LAC, whereas the perfect competitor does. So he is less efficient, in other words. So we have another difference over here. And then the perfect competitor produces more at a lower price, while a monopolistic competitor produces less at a higher price. Okay, so that's another difference in terms of production. You know, how much do they produce? Okay, and then here we know that they produce the minimum of the LAC, where else the perfect competitor does, so creating a less efficient structure happening over there. So those are some of the points that we should note. And then now we're going to spend a bit of time just going over the summary of the market structures, because for the past couple of lessons, we were looking at the different market structures. So we've got all four here on this table. So we will be able to make a comparison, you know, based on the criteria that we were using in one of our previous lessons. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just going over the summary of the market structures. So it's not the summary of the lesson, but the summary of the market structures, because we have been busy over the past couple of lessons looking at market structures. Okay, so there are a couple of things that we use as our criteria when we are looking at the market structures. So the first point over there is the number of firms that we find under each market, and also issues around entry into the market. Are there any barriers that are put into place in order to block other firms or businesses from coming into the market? So we'll look at those under point B. And then under C, we look at the nature of product. Is it a homogeneous or an identical product? Is it differentiated? Is it unique with substitutes or no substitutes? So that will be discussed under this point. And then we will also look at the demand curve. How does it look like in each of the market structures? And then also the market information, the knowledge of the market conditions. Is it made available to the buyers and sellers? Do the buyers get an exclusive, or do they get exclusive information regarding the market conditions, or is the information just made public to all the stakeholders in the market? And then under this point, we're going to look at control over market price, because it's also a very important factor, because we've seen that businesses that operate under a monopoly, they have a huge influence over price, because they are the sole provider of that product, and therefore they do influence the price. But also we've seen a situation where we've got a number of small, large corporations that come together to try and dominate the market. In doing so, they have the power and the capacity in order to influence pricing. So that will be discussed under the control over market price. Profit and loss is another point that we are going to be looking at. Remember, we're looking at the production levels, short term and long term. Where do they make the profit? Where do they make the economic profit? Where do they make the nominal profit? So all of that will be discussed under that. Okay. And then H, we look at the decision making, because it's also an important element to consider. And here we're going to look at some examples, because it's always good to know which businesses or firms fall under each of the categories that we're about to discuss. Collusion also came up. Are there agreements that happen between different producers in order to fix the price? We spoke about the cartels and so on. So that will be part of the collusion under J. And then the technical efficiency as well will be discussed under K, and the allocative efficiency will also be discussed under L. Okay, so let's go back and start with the number of firms that are available or that are allowed in each market. So starting with perfect competition, so we know that there are many firms that can participate in this based on the fact that entry is not restricted. So firms can come in and out as they please. So there aren't any barriers that are put into place in order to block other firms or businesses from entering the market. So hence you have many firms that are available here. And then moving on to monopolistic competition, you have a large number of firms or businesses that are operating under this market structure. And then oligopoly, you've got very few, and then under a monopoly, you've got one. So that one company or firm provides a unique product with no close substitutes, and hence it makes it difficult for consumers to find other alternatives because this is the only product that they are exposed to. And then the entry into the market, we know under perfect competition, it's completely free, it's unrestricted, so you can come in and out as you please. So it's a good point to note. And then here, under a monopolistic competition, there's free and unrestricted entry into the market. And then with oligopoly, there's free, but not easy varies from free to restricted, depending on the product or service that you are offering in the market. And then under a monopoly, we know that it is a restricted market, or sometimes it's completely blocked because they do not want a competitor or an alternative business offering that particular service. So what about the nature of product? So under perfect competition, we know that we deal with homogeneous or identical products. And then under a monopoly or monopolistic competition, it's differentiated. So the products are differentiated. Under oligopoly, the products can be homogeneous or they can be differentiated as well. But one thing that we know about a monopoly is that they offer a unique product with no substitutes. So how does the demand curve look like under a perfect competition? So it is a horizontal line because the firm is a price taker, because we work on the forces of supply and demand, and the market forces are the ones that determine the market price. And then for a monopolistic competition, we know that we've got a downward slope, but relatively elastic. And then here we've got, under oligopoly, we've got a downward sloping, we call it kinked, relatively inelastic and elastic. And then under a monopoly, you've got a downward sloping inelastic, which equals to market value and the demand for the curve. All right, so some important points that we are discussing here. Remember, we are looking at the summary. So the table is the summary of the different market structures that we've been spending time going over. So on this one table, we are trying to sum up all the different structures that we've been looking at over the past few lessons. So let's continue with point E. So for point E, we have the market information. Is the information made available to buyers and sellers, or is it complete or incomplete? So here are important points to note. So under perfect competition, we know that there is perfect knowledge. In other words, the information is complete. And then under a monopolistic competition, we know that the information is incomplete. And also in the oligopoly, we know that the information is incomplete as well. And then under a monopoly, we have perfect knowledge, or the information is complete, because although you have one service provider there, they still make the information available in terms of the product that they are offering to the consumers. Well, we're going to stop right there and take a short break, and I will see you right after this.